Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar, Stay the Course, How the Public Sector Continues to Modernize and Innovate with Red Hat Services. We're so glad that you could join us today. Before we get started, I want to take a quick moment to introduce who we are at Fierce Software. Fierce Software is a small, woman-owned, value-added reseller. We specialize in enterprise open source software, market-leading DevOps capabilities, and secure data platforms for our public sector customers. Our unique reseller perspective helps us understand your goals and technology challenges, allowing us to offer solutions from our extensive portfolio instead of just a single vendor approach. We set ourselves apart in the reseller market by consistently delivering on our core capabilities. We are an innovation broker to leading technologies, getting our customers access to the smartest people and the best technology available. We are a licensed manager, streamlining customer fulfillment and reducing administrative burdens. Our focus is on customer success, ensuring technical support through vendor-trained and certified professional services. We also provide customer enablement by delivering workshops, webinars, and hands-on events to educate our customers about new features and enhance their team's capabilities. At Fierce Software, we're really proud to work closely with our trusted partners to bring innovative solutions to the public sector. One of the ways we're doing that is through our new Fierce Innovation Lab, a secure, hands-on environment built with Red Hat, GitLab, and Dell technologies. Whether it's on-site or remote, it's designed to let government agencies and system integrators explore technologies and DevSecOps workflows in a realistic, mission-aligned setting. For today's session, we're excited to have two Red Hat presenters with us. If you have any questions at any point, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll address them either during or after the presentations. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Matt and Wes.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jody. I appreciate the introduction. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this lovely webinar. Let me share my screen real quick. Everyone's seeing the slides and everything okay? Good deal. Got head nods. I like that. Cool. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to this webinar, Stay the Course, How the Public Sector Continues to Modernize and Innovate with Red Hat Services. I'm Wes Urquhart. I'm joined today by Matt Ammerman. Matt, without further ado, do you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself? Tell the people who you are, man.
Sure thing. Thanks, Wes. Hey, everybody. I'm Matt Ammerman. I lead our technology practice in public sector consulting at Red Hat. So my team's comprised of enterprise architects who are our subject matter experts in a variety of areas, including RHEL, AI, and our automation and application platforms, Ansible and OpenShift, respectively. The latter of which is what we're going to focus on today. So we're going to focus on OpenShift use cases and services. I've been at Red Hat for over 6 years, and I've been in the app dev and container platform space for more than 20 years now. All of it in consulting leadership, working with commercial government and international customers. And I'm happy to be here speaking with you today.
Tough to follow that intro. He's a far more qualified person than I, but I will do my best. My name is Wes Urquhart, like I said at the top. I am an architect in the training and certification team in North America here at Red Hat. So specialized in all things kind of technically in the weeds as relates to the training portion of kind of our services, three legs of our services stool, and we'll talk about all three of those here today. I'm based in Cary, North Carolina. I've been at Red Hat, which is close to Raleigh, for those of you that may not be as familiar. And I've been at Red Hat just about 4 years now, so not too terribly long, but long enough to be excited and be excited to be here. Awesome. So what are we going to cover over the next, 45 minutes or so? I'll do a brief table set of why we're here, and then kind of these lovely catchy section heads here. So the modernization catalyst, what is the reason as to why we're having this conversation today? Why are people looking into things like OpenShift virtualization as a spoiler alert, and Red Hat services to help, and then accelerating the pivot really folds more into how you can take that catalyst and turn it into net change and net positive for your organization, your institution, whatever it might be. And then white glove support for mission success. So how does Red Hat take it the next step, the next level with all three legs of our services stool, consulting, training, and then technical account management? We'll talk a bit about that. And then ongoing results and future vision. We promised a real customer example. That's where we're going to get to it. We're going to tie it all together to a customer example that Matt's been working pretty closely with, and get to be really excited to talk about how all of the concepts we sort of put into motion throughout the presentation tie in really neatly to a really cool customer story. And then open discussion at the end please feel free to use the chat throughout this conversation. If one of us will be talking, the other one will have the chat up and be looking at it for questions. We love making this as interactive as possible. We love making this useful for y'all, and we're happy to take this wherever it needs to go to do so. Feel free to pop in where you're from, or I don't know if this was aired for everyone to hear, but before we got started here, we were talking about our favorite Trader Joe's snacks and appetizers. So if you want to say where you're from and your favorite Trader Joe's snack, feel free to do so. But without further ado, let me set the table. So what we're going to talk about is a bit of background. So a high-level overview of Red Hat itself and how Red Hat Services works with our products and with our partners and with our customers and people to help achieve their goals and our common goals. We'll explore that customer story that I mentioned. We'll talk about how all of these different pieces kind of come together really, really successfully for customers and a specific customer story that makes the difference with Red Hat Services. And then we'll look ahead, right? Where are customers poised to go next? Where are we going from here? Okay, so first and foremost, getting into the modernization catalyst, I think, Matt, I'm handing it over to you.
Yep, thanks. Yeah, so this section is called the Modernization Catalyst. So we're going to have a look at where we are now, but also what are the motivators of, say, the past few years leading organizations to evaluate and even reevaluate their migration and modernization strategies for their IT landscape. There's some systemic motivators, and there's some more acute challenges that are helping to kind of reframe the conversation about what migration and modernization actually is. So let's take a peek at what we're seeing in the market at this particular point in time. So this slide is, of course, a gross generalization, but knowing that we can still observe that many orgs are undergoing modernization efforts, and they've had them in place for years, and ultimately, while they've made progress, there's still huge footprints of virtual machines and even legacy bare metal, right? I think we all know that. Much of the cloud native architectures we see in practice are actually focused around greenfield development. Orgs have been good at establishing standard patterns for new app dev, but when it comes to legacy and existing VM infrastructure, that level of effort is pretty significant. So we're going to talk about how Red Hat's platforms, and especially our services offerings, our consulting offerings and training and technical account management, can drastically lower that kind of overall burden throughout the rest of this presentation. That said, every organization kind of faces unique socioeconomic challenges, pushes for efficiency. We all hear do more with less, and the pressures of shrinking budgets and imperatives to innovate. The pressures of those two juxtaposed with each other. Investments have to be strategic in order to move that modernization needle forwards to the right on this slide. So in order to make strategic investments, you need to have a technology roadmap. It's necessary because these things take time. And there will be large periods of transition, more specifically, where VMs and containers, monolithic apps and microservices will coexist for an extended period of time along the way. So now that, we take this roadmap into account and the anticipated long-term environmental factors that might come into play along that period of time, but there are also more point-in-time challenges that pop up. If you can go to the next slide. Wes, thank you. So I'm not going to belabor this particular point here. I think we're all aware of the specific situation that is illustrated on this slide, but industry events such as acquisitions, emerging technologies, major industry pivots like what we're seeing with AI, all of these things factor into the twists and turns in the road of a longer term modernization or migration program. And these are all things that require your roadmap and strategy to be nimble. And so what do I mean when I say nimble? Well, I borrow a lot of my own definitions from the software world because that's where I come from. And generally in software development, when we say an engineering team is nimble, what we're actually saying is that they have appropriately placed and sized their work tasks and issues, the things that they create or fix, into an iterative framework where certain work is targeted for specific periods of time, but the entire framework allows for those items to move between sprints, if you're familiar with the terminology, if necessary, to adjust to the needs of the business or product management or the market. So this also allows for easier metrics gathering along the way to see if you're doing things against the anticipated milestones. So we believe, in our services strategy, our consulting strategy is predicated on this, that larger strategic programs for migration and modernization can be built this way, that accounts for these short-term sometimes very significant hurdles. And that's what we're going to continue to dig into here. So next slide, please. So when setting about, usually what we hear is phrasing that indicates an approach created by either outcome, right? Like we want to take a tempered approach to modernization. We want to move containers, but we need to be careful around our virtualization infrastructure and making significant changes because it's been so long running and the technology in our organization is tuned towards what we have in place. And it just can't all happen at once. Or there's an imperative to replace virtualization tooling completely. Implementation might be secondary. The actual how it's actually done might be secondary to the outcome of we need to move or migrate as soon as possible. This is full steam ahead. So both of these situations are valid for the reasons that I've highlighted, the challenges that organizations are facing, both long-term and short-term motivators. But truthfully, when we dig into the answer, it's usually somewhere in the middle. And if you can go to the next slide, Wes, please. So migrating versus modernization, the real truth is reality is somewhere in the middle, right? And so when we talk about migrating and modernization, there is this, I think it's the 5 R's, and I've borrowed 3 of them here and then added one of my own. But, we talk about different approaches to this. And like I said, the reality is that it's usually a combination of all of them. But we talk about replatforming in the context of a virtual machine. That is taking the virtual machine and moving it from one management platform to another management platform. You're looking for something with similar or additional capabilities, but you're focusing on standardizing around one platform. You're not making any material changes to what's running in the virtual machine itself. Refactoring is when you actually take an engineering approach to the actual application code, and you're looking for a new deployment method. The most common would be taking a virtual machine or a large monolithic application that might live within a virtual machine and converting it, refactoring it into container-based microservices. And then there's retiring, which is during this process, sometimes we learn that parts of a larger application portfolio, organizations might not even know this, don't even need to be used anymore. The applications, the services, et cetera, have become redundant or aren't even in use anymore. And so during a process, which we'll get into a little bit later on, some of these things are uncovered, and we learn that if we go through these 3 approaches all in parallel as work streams, then we optimize the migration and the modernization approach. So, when we talk about combining all 3 of these, I want to give a more specific example. You replatform a virtual machine, you bring it over to a new platform, right? Then you start to refactor portions of it, right? And you can do that. That's basically decomposing the monolith. Then you start deploying container-based microservices that represent portions of the architecture of that application onto the very same platform. Then that platform provides integration plumbing that allows you to integrate these new services with the existing virtual machine, so you're not losing application functionality. So you still have all of the capability, but now you've replatformed and you are looking at this all through a single management plane. And this is where you are starting to move from just migrating into modernizing. Additionally, as you go through this process, as you decompose applications into their kind of architectural moving parts, you will find opportunities to retire pieces of applications. You won't have to repeat the same functionality within multiple applications. So if you imagine over the course of the past 15, 20 years, development teams in an organization have been deploying applications left and right. And in some cases, they've standardized on chosen shared services. And other times they've worked in silos, and the dev teams have stood up their own capability, which actually is just a replication or a duplication of some other capability in the data center. This is a process of uncovering that and looking for optimizations so that going forward, modern application development leverages those shared services. All of this managed through a platform which is a centralized pane of glass, which we'll talk about in just a second. We can go to the next slide. So to tee up the next part of our presentation, where Wes is going to focus on our portfolio of services, training, and white glove support that he mentioned at the beginning, I just want to run through the overall kind of ethos that we employ when we design our services offerings at Red Hat. And this goes really for any type of product approach. We're talking about virtualization, modernization, and migration, but ultimately it can be applicable to any sort of functional area within IT. So ultimately, we understand that our services need to meet customers and organizations where they are. Orgs are in lots of different places on this continuum, left to right here. So along the journey of whatever the technology area happens to be, whether they're simply maintaining and keeping lights on the left-hand side of this, or whether they've started a migration, or whether they're fully modernized further down the road in terms of exploring new investment like AI, for example. Our goal through services and training and TAM is to help customers progress through this continuum towards the right side of this slide. And we'll start at whatever point the organization already is at. So if we're talking about migrating off of VMware, for example, we might be taking it from the point of customers maintaining a VMware infrastructure for many years, and suddenly there's a compelling reason not to do that. I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to belabor that point, but there could be a compelling reason. Wink, wink. They have staff and resources that understand and understand how to maintain and keep this running, but they're kind of stuck in that slow evolution, rising costs, low developer productivity. Call it a quagmire. If they've started to migrate some of those over to virtualization, specifically OpenShift, then they're starting to get and recognize the benefits of VM management in a singular platform with potentially other workloads like containers. And they start to understand what those reduced operating costs look like because they're the same administrators who now know how to operate that one platform that has purview over virtual machines and containers and other types of workloads. And ultimately, we're moving towards then innovative approaches, new modern app development, and of course deployment of large language models. Again, in the same with the same efficiency and reliability within that same platform. So incorporating things like AI, code assist, and then using OpenShift AI to deploy large language models. They're not only decreasing costs, but now we're talking about increasing revenue. And now we're building new capabilities on top of what was that sort of legacy infrastructure. And so all of these, centralizing these all into a singular platform also allows you to centralize your skills base within your organization as well. And that's where we talk about addressing things like skill sprawl, where you don't have well-defined roles and you have lots of people wearing lots of different hats. So that sets the stage. I'm going to turn it over to Wes now.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, man. Yeah, and I think what I really like, and what you just mentioned there in terms of the takeaway is the ability to kind of be there and be flexible across any portion of the customer journey, whether they're starting from the left side of this or they're all the way to the right, or generally speaking, we're somewhere in the middle in terms of will and desire, and probably all of the above within our customers, right? The same customer might have different situations all the way around different teams. So yeah, this is really helpful. And like Matt said, we'll definitely come back to this as we go. Just a quick shout out. Feel free to drop any questions in the chat as you go. Matt and I are working here together, so we're keeping an eye on it. If you've got questions, feel free to drop them there. So let's talk about how Red Hat's helping. Let's talk about accelerating the pivot. What is Red Hat here, both from a product and a services point of view, to help these customers address these challenges that they're facing? And the first thing that I think is worth pointing out is Red Hat's relevancy in the virtualization space is longstanding. If you look at this timeline here, you don't really think of Red Hat as a virtualization provider necessarily. You think of Red Hat first as Linux, and then, oh, they do some other stuff, right? Well, we do a lot more than that. But let's talk specifically about what we do in the virtualization space. And you can't really talk about it without going all the way back to 2007 and KVM, right? Running KVM on top of Linux was a big innovation, and it continues to drive a lot of these technologies we see today. That technology is core to a lot of what happens. And you kind of fast forward 2008, Red Hat really launches themselves into the space as a virtualization provider with the acquisition of the product I cannot pronounce that I will just now call Rev, or the Red Hat virtualization tool, which is based on KVM. I've tried to pronounce it before. I've been told I've done it wrong 1,000 times, so I'm just going to let it sit there for anyone else to give it a try. Matt, if feel free to come off. You've been doing this a long time. If you want to jump in and try to see, what do you think?
I absolutely do not.
Perfect. All right, great.
I'm in the same boat as you, Wes.
Awesome, good deal. So we're peas in a pod. If in the chat you have a pronunciation guide for it, feel free. Anyway, so then Red Hat joins the OpenStack Foundation, which is also KVM based, right? You're seeing a pattern here. KVM driving the way forward with technologies like Rev, technologies like OpenStack. And then this little thing called OpenShift reaches general availability in 2012. I wonder what that thing is. And then Kubernetes powered OpenShift, which really is the world we're living in today, comes out as OpenShift 3.0 in 2015. Oh, by the way, in 2016, something called KubeVirt launched. This is really key. I think a lot of folks look at our virtualization portfolio and look at OpenShift Virtualization, which is based on the KubeVirt project, and they think, oh, OpenShift Virtualization is a new thing that folks are just looking at as an alternative to other things. But no, KubeVirt's been around for a very long time. We're coming up on the 10-year anniversary of KubeVirt's inception, which is a long time. So it's mature. And then OpenShift Virtualization was launched as a formalized kind of productized version of KubeVirt in 2020. So we're not talking about this as a new innovation, right? We're 5 years on, and in this current world, especially with things like AI, 5 years is an eternity. So it's not like this product and this technology has been something brand new. It's based on something that's been in the works from since the KVM days, more than almost 20 years ago. It's wild to think that 2007 is almost 20 years ago, but that is the facts. So with that in mind, let's talk a bit about kind of that OpenShift virtualization piece that I mentioned there at the end. What is it? Well, I love analogies. Anybody who's ever seen a presentation that I've used before will know that. And this is a great way, I think, to kind of break down something that's kind of an obtuse or kind of a hard concept to grasp. So let's think about OpenShift virtualization, but let's think about your smart TV, right? If you've got a smart TV these days, be it a Samsung, a TCL, or an HCL, or a Vizio, or whatever it might be, everyone's got a TV with an operating system on it these days, for better or for worse. And with that operating system, you have the ability to go directly to the streaming services and add new streaming services, think things like Netflix, YouTube TV, Hulu, ESPN, Peacock. But you also have the ability to do it old school, right? You can just throw an HDMI connection in. I pulled out my old Nintendo Wii the other day and I plugged it in. It still had the tricolored AV cables, the white, the yellow, and the red. My TV had that. I can still do that with my TV. I can play those old games. I can use those old DVD players and watch those old 24 DVDs that I have downstairs, right? I can do either one, right? You don't have to connect to those streaming services if you don't want to. They're there for you if you want to. But in this single pane of glass, you also have this ability to go and use those older retro style of appliances, those older tools that still, hey, they work, right? I don't get ads on my DVDs like I do in the streaming services. So there's something to be said for some of these older school pieces of technology that work. If you want to keep your DVD player, you can. If you want to keep your cable box, you can. If you want to keep your surround system, you can. If you want to play that old Nintendo Wii, you can. If you want to go streaming and cut the cord entirely, you can do that too. There's something in it for everybody. And if you've got different members of your family that maybe have different preferences, you can kind of meet everyone's need with one single piece of technology, with one single kit. Well, that smart TV is a lot like the OpenShift container platform. You look at it as a platform where it can do a lot of different things. You can run containers and virtual machines side by side with a lot of similar frameworks and a lot of similar benefits. You still get those same great graphics, right, on the screen, those capabilities. You get the same easy remote to use. You get the same easy interface, but they're all together and they're kind of running in harmony, right? So if you want to use virtual machines on OpenShift with OpenShift virtualization and keep those, you absolutely can. You can also cut the cord and go to a containerized workloads, a containerized approach, which is like the streaming ability. Or you can do both. We saw that graphic earlier that Matt talked about that was a bit of a gross overgeneralization around, the balance of containerized workloads versus virtualized workloads. But let's be honest, the reality is some workloads work better in a virtualized setting and they're not going anywhere. Sure, there's going to be a tipping point where there are maybe more containerized than virtualized, but VMs still serve a great purpose. And when architected correctly and managed appropriately, they can be really, really great. And so you want to have that ability to really do what suits the application, what suits the workload. So OpenShift virtualization allows you to do that with OpenShift, but taking advantage of the modern management frameworks, things like GitOps, things like Argo CD, things like ACM, things like ACS, these, which is advanced cluster management, advanced cluster security, pipelines, different tooling that you can use to really kind of take advantage of modern management frameworks while still running kind of that older school virtualized infrastructure alongside those containerized workloads. Cool. So hopefully that analogy helps. Here's a bit more technical graphic for those of us that are so inclined, right? You've got containers and VMs living in harmony on OpenShift virtualization, where you're running on top of OpenShift of all different deployments. There are a variety, by the way, like on this left side, you see these different acronyms: OVE, OKE, OCP, OPP, OTTGOGO, whatever it might be, right? You've got all these different acronyms. They're all just different deployments of OpenShift in different ways and different packages and different bundles. The idea is you can do both on OpenShift, just to different extents depending on what your subscription is and with different tooling depending on what your subscription is. But it's a unified platform for both performance and stability. I think is something key to call out here. Again, OpenShift virtualization is based on KubeVirt. KubeVirt in some ways is based on KVM. This whole technology is built on something that's been around for a very long time. It's mature, it's ready for prime time. It's happening now with a lot of different customers in a lot of different places that we'll kind of get into with the specific customer example kind of in a little bit. Something else that's worth calling out here is it includes the RHEL entitlements on top. So if you want to run RHEL boxes and OpenShift virtualization as VMs, those come baked in, which is really great. And you can also run Windows VMs. I think this is probably obvious for anybody that's kind of looking at a new virtualization provider. You got to be able to do both. We can do that too. So all of this is there for you. And then, of course, it's a little bit different in terms of the way it works than maybe some other providers. So we'll talk about managing that skills gap as it relates to that training portion in the bottom right corner here. But we'll dive into that in a much more detail here in a little bit. Okay. Matt, before I move on to the next section, anything you wanted to add here on like the product stack or OpenShift Vert? No? Good.
No, I think you covered it, Wes. I think the biggest piece here for me in terms of just overall strategy for modernization and migration is that first bullet point, the unified platform. Having that single pane of glass, that one administrative pane of glass that you can kind of retune your not only your operations but your skill sets within your IT landscape really kind of consolidates and optimizes around that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree. So let's talk about white glove support for mission success. Let's talk about bringing Red Hat services to the table when it comes to helping folks with this transition. We never said this transition would be seamless. We want to make it as easy as possible and work with you to break it down. And Matt will talk a bit more about our approach to that in a little bit. But how do we do that? Well, we have three legs of what we call our services stool. At the end of the day, it's Red Hatters, it's people getting to help you with your challenge, trying to help deliver solutions with you, alongside you, and partnering with you just in three different ways. One is our awesome consulting team, which are folks that are on the ground working on projects side by side, over the shoulder, working together to get things done in your environment. Our technical account managers, they're great. They're your trusted point of contact for all things technology as it relates to their specific alignment or general alignment. They're your avenue into engineering, into the BU in terms of getting features and roadmap enhancements, things like that. They're also just candidly often the smartest people that I know. And then training and certification, right? Where I come from, where my heart is enablement, right? We want to be there to help you learn how to use our products, learn to use our tools with first in class, best in class training with hands-on exercises, great instructors, and certification, of course, too. Let's break each of these down a little bit more. Consulting, like I said, is there to help you maximize your investment in Red Hat products and in Red Hat subscriptions, create meaningful progress, do things differently at your organization, help you solve a challenge, bring a solution to bear, help spark innovation, and sort of bring some of that Red Hat mentality into your organization to kind of spark that innovation and spark that performance. And of course, be participants in the process, right? Work alongside you to achieve your goals. We're going to talk a lot more about consulting later in the presentation, so I'm going to leave it here for now. Let's talk training. Our training is best in class as far as I'm concerned. We have a complete solution when it comes to our courses. You have the option to take it on your terms, self-paced, with something like our Red Hat Learning subscription, which offers you, all of our courses for an annual basis, both labs and videos and textbooks, or you could take it with an instructor, or why not both? Our instructors are best in class. They're certified and they're ready to teach you how to use these technologies, be there to answer your questions and work with you. And our training is proven to produce results, right? You increase and accelerate your ROI on Red Hat products. I think we all kind of know this, but when you put numbers to it, a trained person is a happier person, is a more confident person, is a more successful person in their job, and they're there to sort of work harder and kind of be inspired to be more confident in what they're doing. And our certification too, by the way, best in class, 100% skills based. They're all practical, no multiple choice, no true false. It's all there to prove what you know. I put this skills path in here to kind of talk a bit more about our OpenShift and OpenShift virtualization learning. We're running a little bit longer already than I thought we would, so I'm not going to take a ton of time to digest this slide, what I want to tell you is a few really important things. First and foremost, we have enablement to help you learn about OpenShift and OpenShift virtualization so that you're not kind of addressing a big skills gap on your own. It's worth calling out the elephant in the room that transitioning from other virtualization provider to OpenShift virtualization can be a big shift, no pun intended. So you want to make sure you address that skills gap. Things like our OpenShift Administration 1 Operating a Production Cluster course is going to give you all those tier 1 support needs that you have as it relates to managing workloads within OpenShift, understanding, storage considerations, how are they different than something I might be more used to? Networking considerations, how is that different than something I might be used to? What is it like to manage a workload in OpenShift? And then our Managing Virtual Machines with OpenShift Virtualization course is going to give you a crash course in all things OpenShift virtualization. What is the operator? How do I install it? What is an operator for that matter? And then how do I get around day to day? How do I spin up virtual machines, create custom templates, do clones, do snapshots? What are storage considerations, networking considerations, migration considerations, and all of the above? And then we've got supporting classes too on things like automating and managing Red Hat OpenShift virtualization with Ansible Automation Platform. That is a mouthful of a title, but it speaks for itself. And then, of course, our multi-cluster management with advanced cluster management for Kubernetes class that talks about how to use ACM and OpenShift virtualization together to create a more kind of robust management solution around your platform. If there's time at the end and there's questions, I will happily dive in much deeper into these. I could spend a lot of time here, but for the sake of time, I am going to keep it moving. I will point out that there's a promo going on right now for our OpenShift virtualization course. It's a bundle with the exam. It's currently, I think, like 70% off or something like that, round numbers through the end of the year. So go check that out through our partners at Fierce if you're interested. All right, rounding it out with technical account management. If you're getting tired of hearing my voice, just hang in there. I'm going to give it back to Matt here in just a minute or two to talk about the customer example on the ground. So, like I said, technical account managers, smartest people in the room is sort of the way I think of them. They're there to help you be a technical advocate within Red Hat. Like I mentioned, your conduit into the BU, into engineering, into roadmaps, those sorts of things. They're also great at really getting immersed in your environment, understanding your needs and your specific use cases. They may see security alerts come out and they may say, hey, you need to be aware of this. You need to be aware of this patch. You need to be aware of this new feature. It can really help you. You need to be aware of this upcoming update to the product that you're going to need to take in. And here are the complications with it because of the way we've got it deployed in your environment. And let's talk about planning that out, right? Be proactive. Think about your Red Hat deployment and how to feed, water, and care for it all throughout the way. And I think I probably just did a lot of that conversation on this slide before. But yes, so our OpenShift, our technical account managers can help you with all of those various things. They're awesome. Get a 10. All right, with that, as promised, I'm handing it back over to Matt. Matt, do you want to talk about the real world case study? It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. This part of the presentation, which is the last part of the presentation, by the way, is called Ongoing Results and Future Vision. So that's kind of like, I mentioned the ethos of the way that we approach these things earlier. That is really the way we talk about it, right? We talk about it from the standpoint of we don't want to set a milestone that's far in the future and work for a while and then report to a customer, yes, we've hit that milestone, or no, we're going to have to kick the milestone. There needs to be ongoing results along the way. These migrations are, as I've said multiple times, they're iterative. They have a lot of steps. They have a lot of work streams, and we want those work streams to be consistently showing results along the way with an eye towards the future. So if our consulting and our training, our services and our training have an eye towards just continual ongoing results, and they're driving towards that future vision. I love Wes's way of saying the TAMs are all about the day-to-day care and feeding, right? That's what it's really all about. So if we can go to the next slide, we've set the stage to kind of put the spotlight on what a realistic migration might look like. So all of this conversation leading up to what this looks like in practice in the real world. So I'm going to first walk through the migration journey the way we see it through our Red Hat lens. This is all based on experience and customer feedback. So to be honest, it's really not that dissimilar from a traditional application lifecycle journey or containerization journey. You've probably seen something similar to this before, but you have an app or a collection of apps. We call it a portfolio of apps that were built over the course of many years using lots of different development paradigms, architecture patterns, etc. What exists within VMs can obviously vary wildly because of this. So some organizations had well-established patterns for app dev along the way, but most have never been that standardized around technology, maybe aside from like the lengthy processes around compliance and security that we're all very familiar with, but that is obviously that's obviously appropriate. It's been actually a perfect environment for devs to leverage the ephemeral nature of VMs, meaning the VM can go away at any time. It's a lot easier to move, change, remove a VM than it is a bare metal server. So that fundamental efficiency is what VMs helped us to achieve. But this, of course, led to another problem in IT, one that became known as VM sprawl. And I remember years ago talking to an engineer at one of my customers, and she told me that they had basically established a practice amongst the development teams of requesting all of the VMs that they thought they'd need at the beginning of a project based on their initial architecture estimates. So this made it so that they didn't have to go back through the processes during the later project stages. But also meant that if they requested too much infrastructure and too much of a VM footprint, they would just instead of going through further process, they would just find other uses for those extra VMs. And so over time, it becomes pretty hard to keep track of these things with this behavior happening in the organization. This is not that uncommon, honestly. So fast forward to today, and when we talk about virtualization migration, we're really talking about a systemic approach to inventory, make sense of, and roadmap a portfolio of applications that are currently running in VMs that the IT org may or may not have a ton of visibility into. So how do we take years of VM-centric patterns and behavior and turn it towards modernization to head towards the right side of this slide and build momentum? Our approach is to take that iterative approach that I've been talking about, building on core Red Hat products that Wes highlighted just a few minutes ago, that make up our Vert container and automation platforms, OpenShift, Ansible, respectively, and leveraging them at the appropriate times as target platforms for app workloads, depending on the work stream. So let's go left to right here real quick. So assessing and planning, and we'll just take a look at that in just a second. But that's the first step, right? Assessing and planning, getting that inventory, uncovering the gotchas and the things that the IT organization might not actually know as they're starting to build out a strategy. Then we get into building out a sufficient platform, or if you're an existing OpenShift customer, modifying an existing platform. Because if you have OpenShift, you actually already have the platform for virtualization, right? Virtualization just becomes a feature of that platform. So by leveraging our subject matter experts plus the training and technical account management offerings, we enable your people or the chosen operations partners that you have in day one and day two operations right there along the sort of building that foundation. And when we then use the roadmap that we've built to plan out that larger scale app portfolio migration, which some of the roadmap is virtualization migration. There are other components that I've already talked about with respect to modernization that represent the future state. And that's as you head closer towards the platform expansion and so on. Our consulting offering that serves as the entry point to all of this is called the Virtualization Migration Assessment. That's on the bottom side here. And so to bring this into the real world, let me show you what the output of a VMA, a Virtualization Migration Assessment, looks like. So these are some results from a real customer. But first, how did we get these results? Well, the engagement includes coming in, running a tool that extracts information from your existing Vert infrastructure, produces a report. It produces a lot of data, produces a lot of inventory. It tells us what OSs are running on virtual machines, what storage capacity does each virtual machine require, what networking stacks are included as part of the infrastructure. We produce that report. We run that report, that data, through a bunch of analysis, an analysis that we've run multiple times, many times for this exact purpose. But we now incorporate some AI-driven analysis, which helps us just prioritize and generate not only an inventory, but also all of the information necessary to recommend that path forward to get from the left to the right side of that previous slide. So, the information gleaned from this inventory highlights things like, what are the easy to migrate VMs? What percentage of VMs are simple, self-contained, low storage utilization, no complex networking? Maybe they're running simple websites or web apps, things that were built, 15 years ago, 10 years ago. Other apps, air quotes, are actually a collection of lots of VMs that are integrated very tightly with each other. An architecture can be multiple VMs, large, maybe bespoke storage requirements, networking segmentation, et cetera, et cetera. These are complex architectures, and we game plan around those as well. But what this gives us is an ability to triage the approach. And armed with this framework, some customers choose to attack volume first, right? And go for the migration at scale with the relatively easy VMs, the standalone VMs running those simple websites or whatever. Other customers have apps that are actually many VMs working together, sharing storage, sharing services. And the plumbing of these apps can either be really complex, or there could be lots of external dependencies. And so in these cases, we may actually have a strategic reason to migrate those complex apps first, right? There might be a federal mandate. There might be some environmental factor that is factoring into why we want to migrate this larger application first, or maybe that is just our first our pilot migration. Combine those two things together. A very valid approach is to set up multiple work streams. One that is work streams that are tackling both of these things at once. So the long-running programmatic migrations, along with many repetitive migrations at scale, where we even introduce automation, and that's where things like Ansible come into play to accelerate migration even more. And this is why the next phase is called the factory, which I'll show you in just a second, because it's about setting up the skills, the process, and all the other necessities to be able to have those multiple work streams running in parallel to meet the timelines and other organizational goals around this migration. But as you can see here, the output of the VMA feeds into the strategy and the roadmap that speak directly to the objectives that the organization might have. So moving on to the next slide.
Yeah, real quick before we do that, I think it's super interesting what you're saying here around this inventory and understanding, where we are. And if we think back to like the R's, right? The refactor, the re-platform, the retire portion of this. I think we were chatting about this, and a lot of customers don't really fully understand their inventory or what they're made up of or how complicated it is or how simple it might be. And getting a real readout here, just understanding how complex your infrastructure really is, your environment really is, can be really, really helpful. And I think, Matt, to your point, like seeing this low complexity, 99%, it doesn't mean everything's going to be easy, but sometimes there really are just simple VMs that, hey, do they really need to be there? I see some older operating systems hanging out on that list. It's like, hey, what's going on there? So I think it's just a really cool output and really valuable for customers, whether or not they end up moving ahead with any kind of migration. Like this in and of itself is just like incredibly valuable and really cool.
Yeah, I mean, just the ability to be able to say, hey, by the way, did you know you're paying for extended life support for this version of RHEL that has been on that extended support life cycle for a long time? This is an opportunity to migrate and also upgrade.
Yep.
Yep.
Anyway, didn't mean to interrupt. On to the next slide.
Yeah, no problem. So, wanted to kind of tie it all together and introduce this notion of kind of getting those multiple work streams going at the same time. And if this is the first step of the virtualization migration journey, I mentioned we want to not only get started by producing that inventory and producing those reports and starting to build that roadmap, but sometimes we also, as part of the same engagement, want to show progress in the beginning of that momentum that's going to drive everything towards the at scale migration. Or if you already have information that is sufficient about your infrastructure, then we want to be able to work with you about and do that initial analysis and build out that roadmap. And this is where that sort of, there's on the left-hand side here, there's that, or this is where our virtualization foundation deployment offering comes in. It's inclusive of the assessment, but it expands upon it and it includes the initial VM migration onto a non-production OpenShift platform. So if you have an OpenShift platform and you want to enable the virtualization feature and understand how it works and start that process, this is sort of the services offering that you would want to go with, because our consultants and your team agree on a reasonable level of effort and go through the process of migrating the first 1, 2, maybe 3 VMs together. It's designed to not only produce a tangible outcome and show evidence, but also kind of give your VM admins, your IT stakeholders, think your storage, your networking, your security folks, all the stakeholders that need to buy into this overall roadmap, and some of the application owners, it gives them a hands-on experience with what it will be like when we do this at scale. And that's when we get into the virtualization migration factory, which is what we call basically doing this at scale. We layer in training in TAM, as Wes spoke about, as things begin, so that we can kick off knowledge transfer in the enablement process. Again, it's just another way we build momentum into that larger migration and towards modernization and towards the next level of innovation. So whichever you choose, the migration assessment, the foundation deployment, the goal is to establish momentum and a strategy and a roadmap that we can carry forwards to the broader migration factory. Now we call it a migration factory, and the reason we do that is because it very well can include more than just virtualization. It's called virtualization migration factory, but it's usually part of a broader migration and modernization overall roadmap, which is kind of what I talked about earlier, where it includes containers and decomposing monolithic applications, et cetera. These strategies are not just centered around virtualization. They're usually broader than that. And so it's built upon the ability to include those multiple and varying work streams. But either way, that roadmap that comes out of the assessment just makes everything significantly easier. And getting back to one of the words I used earlier, makes it more nimble. And so if we can go to the next slide. I'm going to wrap it up now and just we'll open it up for open conversation and questions. But that virtualization foundation deployment offering, the outcomes for this includes the VMA, the assessment, the analysis of legacy virtualization platforms, along with that high-level solution design, that roadmap. It includes a deployed OpenShift Vert platform to be used as the foundation for that, what will ultimately be that larger scale migration factory. Some organizations already have that OpenShift platform, the clusters that are purposely built for this. It will be built as part of this effort. We validate infrastructure, storage, networking, integrations, et cetera. These are the things that we've talked about. And then any targeted ISV integrations, things that are potential gotchas, other things such as backup and disaster recovery on the existing in this existing hardware context. We validate the migration of those initial VMs, as I said, and then we prove those procedures so that we can go into the migration factory at scale with confidence that we've proven out those first few, and all stakeholders have agreed upon the strategy and the way forward. If we go to the next slide, I think this is the last one, our wrap and review. Wes, I don't know if you want to take this one, but I'm happy to. I'll just go through it and then you can add to it if you want to. As Wes illustrated earlier, the timeline shows Red Hat's virtualization product portfolio is mature, proven, it's been around for a while, and it's ready for prime time. Our services provide white glove support for customers every step of the way through enablement and training. There are plenty of courses that can be taken. There are plenty of best-in-class certifications that can be achieved. And then when you couple that with execution from the consulting side and the day-to-day customer care through technical account management, as a whole, that's what we mean when we talk about Red Hat services. And we stand ready to help. We stand ready to help meet whatever the imperative, whatever is the motivational factor, whatever the catalyst is for a virtualization migration, whether that's some form of socioeconomic pressure, whether it's an immediate need because of rising costs of other platform vendors. Whatever it happens to be, we stand ready to help with our folks, with our methodologies, and of course with our products.
Yeah, I echo exactly what Matt said there, and I think it's really cool that we got to see a case study from a real world example that we're working with, around those numbers and around the artifacts and where we're going to go and what they're proven to do. And I think if you take nothing else away from this, take this slide away, right? We're here to help you. Red Hat's people within our services and our products are ready to help you with whatever your challenge may be. We focused on virtualization today, but we're there for any of your other challenges too, whether it's automation, whether it's operating systems, whether it's, upgrades, management, whatever it might be. We're there to help you with whatever you need every step along the way from your technology needs. So want to thank you all for attending and taking the time. Opening it up to Q&A at this point. I've had a few calls for questions in the chat. I'm not seeing anything specific, so this is last call. If anyone wants to get typing away with those, it takes a second, I know, to get a question architect. It doesn't have to be perfect, whatever it might be. We'll accept typos too. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free. And as far as next steps, feel free to be in contact with our awesome partners at Fierce, and thank them for having us today. Thanks, Jody, for kind of facilitating this. Get in touch with Fierce to kind of talk through how Red Hat can help you with any of your opportunities, with services, with OpenShift virtualization, with training, with consulting, with technical account management. We're great partners with Fierce, and they're there to help connect the dots with us. So with that, I think I've given plenty of time for questions. I don't see anything in there. So Jody, happy to hand it back over to you for any final words.
Well, thank you, Matt and Wes, and thank you everybody for joining us today. We will be sending out an email within the next 24 hours with the video recording of this session. At Fierce Software, we're proud to support your Red Hat training journey, and we can offer discounted training rates. We'd be happy to provide you a quote tailored to your needs, so feel free to reach out. We appreciate you spending your time with us today and look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Have a great day, everyone.